Hi folks, HR Funk here. I just finished editing the video you're about to watch, and at over 45 minutes in length, I can tell you it's a long video. And everyone always says don't produce long YouTube videos, nobody watches them, they're terrible, etc. And I've got to tell you, I have more respect for my viewers than to adopt that attitude. I've said for a long time, this is the Thinking Person's channel, and this is a channel for a lot of in-depth information on firearms that you can use in your future firearm selection. And I think anyone that watches this video all the way to the end is going to be glad they did, because there is a ton of information that's going to be presented. And if you have to break it up into 2 or 3 different viewing sessions in order to get the whole thing in, I think you'll be glad you did. So anyway, with all that out of the way, let's get on with the M9 versus APX A1 shootout. Hi folks, HR Funk here. Welcome to the newest installment in my new versus old shootout series, and this is going to be the first time in this series that I've featured Beretta pistols. And along with being the newest installment in the new versus old series, this is also going to be part 2 of my review and evaluation of Beretta's new APX A1 pistol. In part 1 of this video, I did a detailed analysis of the features and function of the APX A1, and this time around I'm going to head out to the range and see how it shoots. But along the way, I'm also going to be comparing it to the handgun that the original APX was intended to replace when it was submitted to the military's modular handgun trials. That being Beretta's own M9, which began life as the Model 92 SBF, and when it was incorporated and adopted by the military in 1985, it became known as the M9. The M9 has been in service now for almost 4 decades, and the APX, the original APX, was a culmination of all of Beretta's engineering and design and manufacturing enhancements that have been included over the course of the last 4 decades. And I really want to see how this pistol, which is actually a redesigned version of the original APX, this was redesigned this year, so the original APX had only been around for about 5 years. Beretta redesigned it to bring in even more enhancements in the design. And I want to see how that's going to compare to this pistol that was originally adopted, as I said, in 1985, and it has design roots going all the way back into the early days of the 20th century. So has Beretta really built a better mousetrap? Have they come up with a new pistol that definitely performs far superior to their own pistol that's been around for a long time? Or have they just come up with a way to manufacture a cheaper pistol that is going to perform well enough, but really doesn't compare to the craftsmanship and manufacturing quality that they were able to conjure up back in the early 1980s? That's what I want to find out in this new versus old series, so let's get to it and see how these two handguns compare. And here are our two competitors head-to-head, or muzzle-to-muzzle, so to speak. And as I said, I covered all the features and functions of the APX A1 in the last video, so I'm only going to be talking about its features and functions in this video to the extent necessary to compare it to the M9 pistol. And I'm going to start out with the sights. The APX has a serrated rear sight and a front white dot sight that also has a tritium insert, so it is a night sight, but there's no reference on the rear sight to help align that for accurate shooting. The M9 for a long time has had a 2-dot system. There is a dot on the rear sight right in the middle and another white dot on the front sight, and when you align these sights you simply dot the eye, so to speak, and put the front sight dot on top of the rear sight dot, and you're able to squeeze off a shot. Now some people don't care for this system, but I've always found it to be very fast and reasonably accurate, and I like that better, having the reference on the rear sight to be able to get proper sight alignment, than I do the APX sights that have nothing on the rear sight and only the front sight. However, as I said, this is a night sight on the front, so that is an advantage over the sights on the M9 because there are no tritium inserts here. There are just white dots, which are essentially white paint, on the front and rear sight. So a lot of this depends upon the environment that somebody's going to be operating in. In a low light situation, then the APX A1 is going to have an advantage because it has that front night sight. But under normal lighting conditions, I like the sights on the M9 better because I have that reference on the rear sight. So because it depends largely upon whether or not someone's operating in the day or at night, or at least in a low light situation, whether or not the APX has an advantage, I'm actually going to call the sights a draw between these two. One last thing I want to mention about the sights is the sight radius, and the sight radius between these two handguns is almost identical. When we line up the rear sights as I've done here, the front sights are almost exactly in the same place, so there's really no advantage one way or the other for either handgun when it comes to sight radius. Now, one place where the APX does have a clear advantage is in its optics capability. This pistol is optics ready. Now, the original APX did not come set up for an optic sight, but this version does, and obviously that's something that is lacking from the M9. The newest version of the M9, the M9A4, does have an accommodation for an optic, but the original M9, the one that's been in service all the way since back in 1985, does not have that, so I'm going to give the APX A1 a check mark for an advantage for the optic sight. Turning our attention to the slide of these two handguns, we can see that the APX A1 has the new iteration of the slide serrations, both fore and aft on the slide, which allow the shooter to manipulate the slide very easily. By comparison, the M9 has rather shallow serrations at the rear of the slide and nothing at the forward end of the slide. So when it comes to manipulating, especially manipulating from different angles, the APX A1 is going to have an advantage there for slide manipulation. For barrel length, when we line up the rear of the ejection port on each handgun, we can see that the M9 has a definite advantage in barrel length. It's about ½ an inch or a little bit more longer than the barrel on the APX. And while most 9mm ammunition reaches its maximum velocity around 4 inches or so, and the APX has a 4¼ inch barrel, it's probably going to reach a higher velocity in the M9 than it does in the APX. Now, whether or not that equates to greater effectiveness on the part of the projectile depends upon a lot of different variables, but I don't think that extra velocity on the part of the bullet is ever going to be a bad thing, and it may be an advantage, especially if we have to penetrate barriers on our way to a bad guy. When it comes to accommodating multiple shooters, some of whom are right-handed and some of whom are left-handed, the APX A1 is also going to win in terms of ambidexterity. You can see that it has an ambidextrous slide stop, and also the magazine catch is reversible. The M9, by comparison, has only a single-sided slide stop, and the magazine catch is reversible. However, it does have an ambi-decocker safety, so it does make an effort to be ambidextrous, but the greater degree of ambidexterity is going to be an advantage of the APX A1. One of the larger complaints over the years leveled at the M9 has to do with its grip circumference and contour. And when we look at the M9, it does have a rather large grip. It takes a good size hand to get a full shooting grip on this pistol, and a lot of shooters struggle with that, especially when they have to reach the long double action trigger and squeeze off an accurate shot. The grip only has grooves on the back strap. The front strap also has grooves, and there is minimal checkering on the plastic grips of the M9. When we compare that to the APX A1, we can see first off the grip is considerably smaller in circumference, and when I grip this pistol it is noticeably smaller. In fact, it surprises me what a good grip I can get on this pistol when you consider it still uses a double stack magazine. But this is one place where the Beretta engineers did a good job. Along with just the dimensions of the grip and the contour, it also has checkering on the front strap, checkering on the back strap, texturing on the sides of the interchangeable back strap, and this is an interchangeable back strap. This is the medium size back strap. You can also add a large or a small back strap to accommodate even more shooters, and we have texturing up here at the top of the grip. There is texturing forward on the slide. So there was a lot of time and effort put into trying to accommodate more and more shooters and more shooters' grips with the APX over and above the M9. Now, as to whether or not that's going to equate to better shooting qualities, that's what we're going to have to find out when we get to the range. Also, before we completely leave shooter interface and grip, I want to point out this deep undercut at the rear of the trigger guard on the APX A1. When we look at the M9, there's nothing of the sort there, so it's not possible to grip the pistol as high as it is with the APX A1. So all in all, grip is going to be points for the APX A1, and as I said, whether or not that means it's going to shoot better, or more accurately, we're going to find out later. Operating system. The M9 has a trigger system that goes back to, as I said earlier in the video, the early days of the 20th century, with a double action first shot, and then each shot after that is a single action shot, unless or until the shooter decocks the pistol by rotating the safety decocker to the down position and then rotating it back to the fire position in order to render the pistol ready to fire. In the double action mode, the trigger, as I said before, is farther forward in the trigger guard, and for some shooters that is a long reach. Once the pistol is fired and the trigger goes to single action mode, you can see it's farther back toward the rear of the trigger guard, and it's not as long a reach for many shooters, and a lot of people find that easier. But the shooter has to manage that trigger transition from the long, heavy double action pull to the short, light single action pull, and some shooters struggle with that as well. The APX A1 has what is generically called a double action only trigger, which in this context means it has the same pull for each and every shot. And you can see it is a relatively short trigger pull. This trigger is not, however, tremendously light. It's also not very smooth. It's got some creep. It's got some over travel. It's just not at all my idea of a good trigger. It's an adequate trigger at best. Whereas the trigger on the M9, the double action pull is long and heavy, but it is smooth. And the single action pull, once I get it in single action mode, is very nice, very short and light. And I've never done a thing to this pistol. This is the same stock trigger that was in this pistol when I bought it, same springs and everything else. But still, I think in terms of being smooth and the single action pull being light, the M9 is going to win the trigger comparison, even though the travel of the APX A1 is shorter. I just like the feeling of the trigger better on the M9 than I do this trigger on the APX A1. Also, while discussing operating system of the M9 does not use a tilting barrel. It uses a locking block that basically was borrowed from the Walther P38, and because of that, I have always found the M9 to be a very smooth shooting pistol. It just does not seem to have quite the muzzle flip that you get with the tilting barrel systems, and I really enjoy shooting the M9. It's a very pleasant shooting 9mm. The APX A1 does have a Browning style tilting barrel, and I don't know until I shoot it whether or not I'm going to like that or if I'm going to think that it does exhibit more muzzle flip. So that one's going to be something where the jury will be out until after I actually shoot this pistol and see what I think of the recoil characteristics. Simplicity of use is going to go to the APX A1 simply because the only thing you have to do to operate this pistol is load the magazine, cycle around into the chamber, and then if you need to fire it, press the trigger. If not, then place it in the holster and wait until you need it. The M9, of course, requires the shooter, once they place the loaded magazine in the magazine well and cycle around in the chamber, to decock the pistol, and then the decocker can be a little bit of a concern. There are times, especially during a reload, where it's possible to inadvertently have the safety applied, or maybe if the shooter just doesn't realize that they bumped the safety while they were carrying it, and all of a sudden they draw the pistol and the safety's on, and it might take a little bit to figure out why the pistol's not shooting. You don't have to worry about any of that with the APX A1. I never have had a problem with that personally with the M9, but I know a lot of shooters have. So when it comes to simplicity of operation, the APX A1 is going to win in that category. When we look at the magazine capacity of our two contenders, this is simple math. The APX A1 holds 17 rounds in the magazine. The M9 has 15 rounds in the magazine, so 2 more rounds in the APX A1 advantage APX A1 in terms of magazine capacity. Taking a look at weight, the M9 fully loaded has a weight of 39.8 ounces, so almost 40 ounces with the M9 when it has 15 rounds in the magazine and 1 round in the chamber. And the APX fully loaded with 17 rounds in the magazine and 1 round in the chamber comes in at 36.8 ounces. So weight advantage to the APX, but not a huge weight advantage, only a few ounces. When it comes to safety, the M9 has the definite safety advantage between these two. The long, heavy double-action trigger helps to guard against a situation where someone might be startled, and if they have their finger on the trigger, inadvertently squeeze the trigger. Also, the decocker safety for the M9 can be put in the safe position and completely disengage the trigger if someone wants to carry the pistol in that manner. The APX A1 has no external safety, and the short trigger does not have the same advantage when it comes to being anti-stress as the long heavy trigger on the M9, so advantage for safety goes to the M9. Points for versatility go to the APX A1, largely due to its equipment rail here at the front of the dust cover. You can attach lights, lasers, or what have you to this pistol. Obviously, there's no means to do that with the M9, although the M9A1, which has been used by the Marine Corps for some years, does have that feature. But the original M9, as it was adopted in 1985 and as still is being used in the military, does not have any means to accommodate flashlights, lasers, or anything else you might want to add to the pistol. Ease of maintenance is also going to go to the APX A1. The polymer frame is impervious to elements, chemicals, or what have you. Also, Beretta has come up with a new coating for the barrel and slide that is supposed to be even more corrosion and chemical resistant than the previous coatings that they used. Now, I've never noticed the M9 as being particularly susceptible to rust and corrosion and what have you, but I'm going to take Beretta at their word that this new coating is superior to their older coatings, and also, along with the other things I mentioned, give points for ease of maintenance to the APX A1. And lastly, the APX A1 is a modular design. The stainless steel chassis inside the grip frame here can be removed. That is the serialized part of the firearm, so it can be installed in other grip frames. You can switch it out with other barrel and slide links and configure it differently for different shooters and different purposes, whereas the M9 has no means to do anything of the sort. So modularity, of course, goes to the APX A1. So in looking back over my list where I compared the design advantages of the M9 and the APX A1, it appears that the advantages overwhelmingly went in favor of the APX A1. In fact, the only things that I have in the column for the M9 are safety and also trigger quality, but I will freely admit that trigger quality is a highly subjective and debatable topic. There are some shooters who very much do not like that double action, single action trigger transition. I don't mind it, but a lot of people are going to come down on a different side of the aisle when it comes to that particular aspect of the M9's design. In any case, all the X's and O's here in the shop don't mean much if the APX A1 doesn't deliver on the range. So now it's time to head to the range and pit our two contestants against each other head to head and see how they stack up in that arena. So the first order of business at the range was to test the pure mechanical accuracy of both handguns. And since these are both intended for military service, I backed off to a little bit greater distance than I typically do when I perform my accuracy test. Instead of 30 feet, I backed off to 45 feet or 15 yards. Again, I was shooting rested from the bench, and I started out with the APX firing 5 rounds, and I was using some older Remington 124 grain plus P ammunition. So it was roughly equivalent to military NATO spec ammo. And when I fired the M9, since I was testing pure accuracy, I did fire every round single action. And here's how it went. And here's the target from that 15-yard accuracy test. The APX A1 is at the top of the target. The M9 is at the bottom. And the group from the APX A1 is 3 inches center to center. But this very first shot that I fired down here at the bottom, I think has more to do with trying to manage that heavy trigger of the APX A1 and squeeze off an accurate shot than it does with the actual mechanical accuracy of the pistol. The other 4 shots are in a nice 1 1/4 inch group up here, and I think after that first shot I started to manage that heavy trigger a little bit better, and I fired the shots a little bit more accurately. With the M9 firing all 5 of those shots single action, the group is pretty nicely centered in the target, and it's right at 1.5 inches, and I really think the mechanical accuracy of these 2 pistols is about the same. If I take away this bad shot that I really think was a result of the trigger on the APX A1, I've got a 1 1/4 inch group and a 1.5 inch group, and if I went out and reshot them, they could very well change positions as far as which one has the most accurate group. So I really think accuracy is a wash, but shootability, which I would define as a shooter's ability to take advantage of that mechanical accuracy, really goes to the M9 because of that superior trigger. Now again, I was firing these shots single action, so I was not dealing with the double action, single action trigger transition. And the M9 is just a smoother shooting pistol. The recoil impulse just doesn't feel as snappy as the APX A1. Not that the APX A1 is excessive, it's just nicer to shoot the M9. Of course, also it's a heavier pistol, so that also helps to absorb a little bit of the recoil. But again, in terms of pure mechanical accuracy, I think this is a draw. And I also think this demonstrates that the APX A1 probably needs a little bit of a windage adjustment with that rear sight to bring it over more to the center of the target. Next, it was on to some more dynamic drills. This time, I set up at a distance of 5 yards, and from that distance, with each handgun, beginning with the APX A1, I was firing double taps in a time limit of 2.5 seconds. Now, I was not taking the entire 2.5 seconds to fire my double taps. Rather, I was firing them as fast as I could accurately keep shots on the target. Now this time, when I shoot the M9, and with every drill that I shoot from here on out, the first shot is fired double action, then each successive shot is fired single action. So I am managing that trigger transition the rest of the way through the video every time I'm shooting the M9. And here's how the double taps went from that distance of 5 yards. And here are my two targets, and I've marked the shots from that 5-yard shooting with these black squares on each one. And beginning with the APX A1, we can see a fairly respectable group in the center of the target there, pretty well centered from that distance of 5 yards. I've got all heart and lung shots except one down here that's just a little bit below the heart, but that's definitely not somewhere that I would want to take a bullet. But look at the M9 over here. Every single one of those 6 shots is on either the heart or the aorta. And keep in mind, this is managing that double action, single action trigger transition on each one of these pairs of shots. And that is some tremendous accuracy from that pistol at that distance. And even more impressive is the fact that the average time for my 6 pairs of shots with the APX A1 was 2.11 seconds, 2.11 seconds. The average time for my 3 pairs of shots with the M9 was 2.09 seconds, or 2/100ths of a second faster with the M9 than with the APX A1, which really speaks to the trigger quality of that M9 pistol and the smoothness of that double action pull and being able to transition quickly to the single action pull. And it says something about the quality or lack thereof from the trigger of the APX A1. And I think this speaks volumes for everything that's been made over the years about the difficulty in managing the long, heavy double action trigger pull of the M9 and having to deal with 2 different types of trigger pulls and manage the trigger transition and all that. I haven't shot my M9 since I had the Gerson pistol review that was probably 4 or 5 months ago. And I went out there cold out of the box other than the 5 shots that I fired in the accuracy test and was shooting it this well. So that really speaks to that trigger of the M9 and its quality. And again, the somewhat lack of trigger quality in the APX A1. Next, I backed off to a distance of 7 yards with each handgun, this time starting with the M9 and firing from that distance 3 failure drills, which is 2 shots to the body and 1 shot to the head in rapid succession. Again, starting with the M9 in double action mode and then transitioning to single action for the second and third shot. After the M9, I moved to the APX A1 and gave it a try on the same drills, and here's how it went. And I've now marked the shots from the failure drills with the red stickers. By the way, every time I do this, I feel like a TV weatherman. For the APX A1, I've got 3 shots on the heart, 2 spine shots. Let's make that 3 spine shots just below the heart. I have 1 shot, I think this was my very first failure drill, and this was just purely mismanaging that heavy trigger on the APX A1. And I pulled it down well below the head into what would probably be about the collarbone area there. These 2 shots weren't bad. Obviously this one was good, this one wasn't bad. But again, for me on failure drills from 7 yards, this is kind of mediocre. I've said before, 7 yards is just far enough away on a failure drill that if you're not careful or you're not very precise with your failure drill, it is easy to throw a shot. The M9 over here continues to be extremely impressive. That's all I can say about it. All but one of the body shots are on the heart or aorta. I've got one lung shot there that made it just off the heart. I've got two very good headshots. This one was a little bit off. It would have taken a chunk of gray matter with it, but it might not have been instantly incapacitating, might not have turned the lights off right there. But all in all, I would say the accuracy of the M9 on that drill outdid the accuracy of the APX A1. When we turn our attention to time, the average for all three failure drills with the APX A1 was 2.7 seconds, 2.70. By the way, on all these times, I rounded them to the nearest 100th of a second. So 2.70 for the APX A1, 2.80 for the M9. The APX A1 was faster this time around by 1/10 of a second. And again, I just keep coming back to, with everything that's been said over the years about dealing with that heavy double action trigger, and it makes you inaccurate, it makes you slow, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We got better accuracy that time around with the M9, and it was slower by 1/10 of a second. And here again, if I went out and reshot those drills, I might actually shoot it faster the second time around with the M9 than I shot it with the APX A1. So at least at this stage in our shootout, the M9 is staying shot for shot with the APX A1. It is actually outperforming it a little bit in time on the first drill, and accuracy as well on the first drill, and accuracy wise on the second drill here, and the time is almost close enough to call it a draw. So we're not seeing the APX run away with this shootout yet. So let's move on to the next drill. This time around, I backed off to a distance of 10 yards, and this was to simulate a situation where someone in the military might be engaged in a hostage rescue operation or something like that, and maybe they're searching a building, or otherwise they are moving with their firearm or their handgun in their hand, and all of a sudden encounter an unexpected hostage situation where they've got to come up and take a snapshot that's going to be a headshot from that distance of 10 yards. So starting with the handgun in my hands at the distance of 10 yards, I activated my shot timer, and on the signal to fire, I came up, and as quickly as I could align the sights, I squeezed off one headshot. And I did that 5 times in a row with each pistol. Each shot that I fired with the M9 was fired double action, so I fired 5 double action shots with the M9, and I fired 5 shots, of course, with the only trigger mode that I had for the APX A1. And this time around, I switched again the order and started out with the APX A1 and shot the 5 shots with that one first. Then I transitioned to the M9 and shot the 5 shots with the M9 second. And here's how it all looked. And I've marked those headshots on each target with the yellow stickers. I hope you can see those. Sometimes they're a little difficult to see on the white target. This is the first time that the accuracy of the APX A1 has actually visibly surpassed that of the M9. And when we look at these two targets, I have a nicely centered group. Those are 5 good headshots from the APX A1 from that distance of 10 yards. The M9 has a slightly larger group. In fact, the very last shot that I fired was just below the medulla oblongata there, but it clipped the juncture between the medulla and the spinal column right where it comes together there. So I think I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical examiner or anything, but I think this would have probably taken this person out of the fight pretty quickly. So as far as effectiveness, I've got good effective headshots on each target with each handgun, although I have more accurate shots with the APX A1. When I look at time, the time for my 5 shots averages on the target for my APX A1 of 1.46 seconds from the signal to fire on average until I had put that shot in the head. With the M9, the time was 1.48, 2/100ths of a second longer. These times are so close, I'm really not seeing any advantage at all for the APX A1 and its consistent trigger when I look at that. When I look at the accuracy of this drill, as I said, I see an accuracy advantage for the APX A1, but time-wise, it is a dead heat between these handguns at each stage so far. And as I said a moment ago, the M9 certainly was accurate enough in this drill from that distance that it's holding its own. So after this, I backed off to a distance of 15 yards, and from 15 yards on the signal to fire, I came up and fired 5 shots into the body of the target as fast as I could accurately fire those 5 shots. So I'm not spraying and praying from that distance. I switched the order again and started out with the M9 and fired my 5 shots with that first. Then I switched over and fired the 5 shots with the APX A1, and here's how that one went. And those body shots from 15 yards are now marked with the green stickers. And with the APX A1, I have a nicely centered group right here. Those are all heart and lung shots. These two, I guess, are just below the heart. Those are on the spine, but a nicely centered group with the APX A1 from that distance of 15 yards. And I think I was finally starting to get acclimated to that trigger by the time I got to this point in the shootout. So I achieved a nice group with that. Coming to the M9, the very first shot, the double action shot, went high for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why I did that. Now still, this would have been a throat shot. I wouldn't want to get shot there. This would probably have taken most people out of the fight, but it's not with the rest of the group down here in the body, which were all single action shots. I've got 2 good lung shots, 2 good heart shots down here, but I do have that one shot that's a little bit high. So accuracy-wise, the APX A1 won that stage. Turning my attention to time, the APX A1 had a time of 6.08 seconds. The M9 had a time of 6.21 seconds. So again, we're looking at fractions of a second difference in times, but the APX A1 did win by 13/100ths of a second. I keep saying that I feel like a broken record because I'm saying this over and over, but again, these results are so close, and the APX A1 has the advantage of 4 decades of engineering and manufacturing advancement, and the M9 is still hanging right with it even at this drill. So from here, I went back to 25 yards because being military handguns, there is always the possibility there could be an extended range engagement. Now, I know everybody always yells at me that nobody uses handguns in the military, it's all rifles and, you know, whatever, artillery and such. Having been in the military and issued a handgun every day, I could envision circumstances where I might have had to employ that handgun at extended distances. So I backed off to a distance of 25 yards. From that distance, on the signal to fire, I fired 5 shots into the body of the target. This time I started with the APX A1 and finished off with the M9. And here's how it went. And I've marked those 25-yard shots with the blue stickers, and I know the stickers are getting very crowded on the targets and it's getting difficult to see them, but from 25 yards for the APX A1, the shots are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's not necessarily the order that I shot them in, that's just the order in which I'm pointing them out. For the M9, the shots are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. With the APX A1, I have one shot that was completely off the silhouette of the target. This would probably have been an arm or a shoulder hit, but definitely it would not have been as effective as the shots that are over here in the body. With the M9, all the shots are inside the silhouette from that distance of 25 yards. Again, the first shot went a little bit high on me, but this is another one right here with the one that I fired previously that's basically severing the spinal cord right at the bottom of the medulla oblongata. And I don't think I'm going to complain about that shot at all from 25 yards. The Beretta felt easier to shoot from this distance of 25 yards, and I think a lot of it had to do with the trigger. With the APX A1 from that distance, I was back now to where I was trying to manage that trigger and fire accurate shots, and I actually mismanaged it on one shot and pulled it off the silhouette. Whereas with the Beretta, I squeezed through that long, heavy double action pull. The shot went a little bit high, but it definitely stayed on there. As far as windage goes, it was fine. The elevation was just a little high. The next shots were all lung shots, one shot on the heart, and a spine shot from that distance of 25 yards. So accuracy-wise, from that distance, the Beretta once again outperformed the APX A1. When I look at the times, the APX A1 took 8.57 seconds, 8.57 seconds for me to fire out those 5 shots. The M9 did that same thing in 7.79 seconds. So almost 3/4 of a second faster and better accuracy from the M9 at that distance of 25 yards than I was able to achieve with the APX A1. Well, folks, the shootout is over, so what do I think is the result of the comparison between the M9 and the APX A1? The first thing I'll say is reliability-wise, the APX A1 was fine. Now, I didn't mention it during the video, but as I was shooting, I was using a variety of different full metal jacket ammunition and hollow point ammunition, and I always fired the same ammunition in each handgun for each drill, but in different drills I was using different ammunition to check the functional reliability, and I had obviously no problem with either one. The APX A1 feels good in the hand. It is a pretty standard representation of the modern polymer frame striker fired handgun. And It's probably really no worse than a lot of the other ones that are out there these days. But I gotta tell you, I think if I was part of the design team that put the APX A1 together, I would be a little embarrassed that a handgun that was designed by my predecessors over 4 decades ago was running side by side with the APX A1 and in several drills outperforming it both in accuracy and time. Like I said, I think I'd be a little embarrassed by that, unless my goal was to just produce the absolute least expensive handgun possible using polymer and stamped parts and what have you, so as to maximize my employer's profit margin. And in that case, if that was my true goal, then I might be happy with my new promotion and my raise and go on merrily about my life. But if I wanted to produce the best handgun possible, I'm not sure that they really outproduced the handgun that they've been manufacturing for a long, long time. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours. And that's going to do it for today's video, folks. Remember, if you purchase anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 5% off anything you purchase from Optics Planet. Also remember the new discount code from Hot Munitions. If you go to Hot Munitions, you can use my discount code there, which is HRFUNK10, and that'll save you 10% off your purchase from Hot Munitions. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.